This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony, air quotes nippy, Ames.
And this is A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about what happens when things that seem like a great thing at first go bad.
Every week, we chat with survivors, experts, and whistleblowers for real cult stories told directly by the people who lived through them.
Because we want you to learn a few things we've had to learn the hard way.
Like, if you think you're too smart to get sucked into something culty, you're already prime recruitment material.
You might even already be in a cult.
Oops. You better keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Season 6 of A Little Bit Culty. Welcome back, dear listeners. Starseeds, light beings, seekers of transformation, have we got a pitch for you?
Starseeds, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Go with it.
It's a self-study spiritual curriculum that blends light Christian terminology with metaphysical teachings, plus a dash of Freudian psychology and a light spritzing of Platonic philosophy.
It's like an Aperol spritz. That's right. The curriculum we're talking about, it's practically a greatest hits compilation of new age bangers.
It consists of 3 books, a text, a workbook for students, and a manual for teachers, and it has been blessed by Oprah herself. Well, Oprah, I think this is your 3rd cameo on one of our episodes.
Maybe even 4th. And if you really commit to the study of it and surrender to its radical intensity, you can shift your perception from fear to love and travel forgiveness as a path to awakening. You're only a shift away from a miracle at any moment.
Go on. I've never heard this before.
Okay. So we're talking about The Course in Miracles. Mm-hmm. Do you know it, listeners? Is it on your bookshelf?
No judges from us. We definitely have owned a copy of it.
And by we, I mean someone in our production team. Guess who? Not me.
And based on the number of emails and messages that we get from you requesting that we cover it on A Little Bit Culty, you know it as well.
And while there are millions of admirers of A Course in Miracles, or ACIM as we may call it throughout this episode, there's a growing number of critics and defectors who are speaking up about it. ACIM, you're sounding a little bit culty.
Our guest today, Andrew LeCompte, is one of those critics. He's a lovely, sweet man, and he's got the definitive story to tell, I believe.
At least one part of the story. Growing up in a loveless, authoritarian household primed Andrew for an adulthood where he looked for love in all the wrong places.
When his AA sponsor introduced Andrew to A Course in Miracles, it sparked a 20-year study of the course that led him to some dark places.
Like an intentional community in Utah that turned out to be a full-blown, alleged cult by a celebrated spiritual teacher. Utah, you are so very culty, by the way. Is it the altitude? What is it?
My dad was born in Utah.
Well, that explains a few things.
For Andrew, it all started off like a proverbial good thing of so many cult survivor stories.
He taught The Course in Miracles in Mexico, Spain, Hawaii, and Canada, and had amazing experiences leading him to believe that he was on track to finding the, quote, love of God, all as promised by his teacher.
But after 6 years of mistreatment, emotional manipulation, and being coerced out of over $200,000, he didn't find any miracles.
His memoir, Finding Miracles, Escape from a Cult, is a must-read and a cautionary tale for seekers everywhere. And it suggests that maybe A Course in Miracles should come with a black box warning. May cause serious mindfuckery.
They make those?
Yep.
Okay, we're talking to Andrew today about his experience, what drew him to ACIM, where it all went sideways, and how he only found the love he'd been looking for after he escaped.
That's a kind of miracle in itself, if you ask us.
Here's our chat with Andrew LeCompte.
Andy, welcome to A Little Bit Culty.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's just a delight to be here.
It's a delight to have you, and I feel so honored that you have chosen A Little Bit Culty to be your first interview ever. So let's go back to the beginning. What was the initial invite? How did you hear about A Course in Miracles?
In the beginning, a very good friend invited me to a Course in Miracles meeting. And I went, and it was way over my head because the Course is a very complex book. And it's 1,200 pages, and it's written in a kind of Shakespearean way. And it took me a long time to get through it. I read it twice fully before I even began to understand what it was about. But it had an authoritative, clear voice that was inspiring. And I kept at it for several years, going to this Course in Miracles discussion group. And then I went to a conference in Connecticut where David Hoffmeister showed up to speak. And at first I thought he was some Dianetics pushing guy from Los Angeles. He had red hair. And I thought, I can't believe they were going to let this guy speak. But they let him speak, and he was very clear, and I was impressed. And then we were in kind of a gymnasium building, and he walked across the whole floor and came and sat next to me. And I was surprised. And I chatted with him a little bit, and he seemed like a very regular, normal guy. I was watching for him, and I found there's a ton of stuff that he had on his internet homepage and other pages, and I began to listen to it, and a lot of it I had transcribed and downloaded, and I began to have a collection of his things. And then I went to various retreats that he held. The biggest one was in Spain, in the island of Mallorca, where I was for 6 weeks with him and the messengers. And it was wonderful. It was a beautiful environment. We had a movie every night that David interpreted and did it well. They taught me how to take videos of David during that 6 weeks and make videos that we could put on the internet, and we did that. And I thought, oh, yeah, wow, I'm really in with this. And then they had a thing called the angel walk, where I would walk down with blindfold on between 2 rows of people who would caress me and say, welcome to heaven, Andy. We love you. We're so glad you're here. And I was blown away. And so were the other participants. We thought, my God, we found it. We found the promised land. And in our minds, we could take that back.
What did that feel like?
I felt like I'd arrived, and I was really happy, kind toward other people. And I thought, yes, this is it. This is the promised land. However, there were some red flags.
Before we get to that, and I do want to hear all the red flags, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, when he walked across and sat down next to you,
too.
did you feel targeted? Did you feel like that was an accident in hindsight, or what was your thought there?
With hindsight, I thought, well, this was the hand of God, or this was to be. And later on, I felt really chosen when he asked me to edit his first book, which was called Awakening Through A Course in Miracles. And I did it very well. It's a good book. And I thought, I've arrived. Here I am shaping the words of Jesus, as David said they were, coming through his mouth. And then I was putting them into book and video form for the world. And I was excited. I felt I was really home.
You got given some very special roles and tasks. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm curious, and we're going to come back to that time in a minute. But when in your book, I was really struck by how you shared your childhood. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit with our audiences now in reflection about what was happening in your childhood that perhaps
made you susceptible
to these moments of feeling special and chosen and part of this team of angels.
I didn't really know what love was. I was raised in a sort of a custodial care. My parents were not into parenting at all. And yeah, I thought that I was valueless, especially, I'd be physically spanked by my father. and not hugged afterwards by anybody. It was just like I decided I was a bad person and unloved. And my mother, I was acting out at school. My mother was called into a psychologist's office. And then she came back and she said, Andrew, you know what he asked me? He said, do you really love your child? And I replied, of course I do. I love you, and you know it, don't you, Andrew? And I went, yeah, because I didn't know. Yeah, my brother was a very talented guy, but he was very driven. And it turns out later he was gay, but he was my protector. He was the one I was close to in the family. And he committed suicide. I think I was 19. And that really blew my concept of myself and the world to smithereens. And I went off to die in Morocco. And I was going to just hashish myself to death in a cave somewhere. And I was about to start that. I got into Marrakesh in Morocco. And I met this couple who were just the most wonderful, loving people. And they liked me. And we had a lot of jokes. We traveled around Morocco and we had a blast. And I thought, I don't need to die. I'm worth something. And I came back and yeah, I did. I finished at the University of Wisconsin and it turned my life. I was really grateful for it.
Where was that in relation to starting A Course in Miracles, your Morocco experience?
Oh, I was in college then. I started the course in 1990. So I'm 75 actually. And
you've lived a life.
Yeah. Yeah. I had done other things that were culty, but I didn't know it before I started the course. Transcendental meditation.
We have an episode on that, by the way.
Oh, good.
I'll send it to you.
All right. Listen. And Est said, you're responsible for everything in your life, even your partnership. And usually people say that's 50-50, but no, Est was saying it's all you. So I was living with this woman who I didn't really get along with very well, but I said, well, that must be my fault. So let's get married. It was a bad idea.
When everything's your fault, a lot of ideas come from believing everything's your fault. Yeah.
And we talk about that actually a lot in this podcast, how there's the good and the bad of those concepts. Like it is great to take responsibility for the things in your life, but you can't take responsibility for somebody else being a bad person or not a good fit for you. And there's no room for that in those programs about transformation and
right.
Est coming soon, by the way. Coming soon on this podcast channel. But before that, so you dabbled in these things, but you never really committed full on as you did with Course in Miracles. What was it about the teachings that caused you to think, hey, I'm going to really devote my life to this? Or was it more about the role you had that David and the leadership gave you?
Well, it was both.
Okay.
Because I was really unaccomplished. I had mastered the Course before I went to the Living Miracles community in Utah. And so I spent a couple years with my second wife talking about it and seeing if we could pull it together. Because the Course says there's this concept of the special love relationship and that it's not a good thing. It's ego-driven and it distracts you from God. But the special relationship can be turned into a holy relationship if you listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit and things like that. And A, I couldn't hear the Holy Spirit. And B, she wouldn't have any of it. She wasn't interested in a spiritual life. And it's very much like a humanist now who says, yeah, we really have to take responsibility for our own behavior. There's nobody up in the sky who's going to direct you or tell you what to think or do. You have to rely on your own morals and values to figure that out. We split up on that because I was almost fanatical about the Course being the truth. And she took me to her psychologist and we talked. Grilled me. He said, what do you think you're doing? Why you're doing this? doesn't make sense. Don't you love her? Isn't she a good wife? She was a wonderful wife. But he said, well, then tell me, what's going on with you? And I said, I really feel I've been called by God to go to this Living Miracles community in Utah. And that's kind of a conversation stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I've done it. I've broken with the world that was a egotistical special relationship, and I'm glad to be free of it.
So it felt noble.
Yeah, I felt like a crusader setting off to the light, like Jesus left his home, and Peter in the Bible, the fisherman, he left home, and this is what we were called to do. And David Hoffmeister said, yes, you're being called out of the world to serve God. And I thought, wow. And then the Course says there is no death. And I thought, wow, I'm on the right path.
I'm so curious about the tenets of the Course itself and how that's like, can you tell us a little bit more about the teachings and the main principles and how that set you up to have this decision feel like the best thing ever?
You heard also, too, it made love bad.
Yeah, because it was egoic. You had an egoic relationship.
It made your desires bad, and then it sold you the nobility aspect at the same time.
Yeah. So the Course is a whole different worldview. It says that back in eternity, the ego had this thought, well, what would it be like to separate from God? And so this part of the ego mind, which would be my mind, split off from God, then was so terrified at having done that, it needed a place to hide. So it made the world as a place to hide. And that this whole world is an illusion, and that we need to transcend it by forgiving it, which means, yes, we take responsibility for making it and all the problems in it, and we forgive. We let it all go, see that it's all an illusion, and just focus on the love of God, which is a big order. And I began to think, okay, my own egoic thoughts aren't worth anything. The Course says there are no private thoughts, that it's all just an illusion, and people are illusions. Yeah, so don't really attach to another person. It's heavy stuff, really. Yeah. I was into it. I thought, I can do this. David did it. And the messengers, who are the people who are high up in his hierarchy, have done it. I can do it. I'm well on my way, I thought.
Were you making everything else bad in order to pursue the work?
Yeah. My wife at the time even put framed photographs of her and my son and people in my suitcase, unbeknownst to me. And when I started driving west, I stopped at the first motel after a day of driving, opened my suitcase and saw them, and I threw them away because I thought, she's just cloying, trying to pull me back from my sacred mission by trying to reform these attachments.
Us versus them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm shocked at what I did.
This podcast wouldn't happen without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Are you with us? Come find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty for bonus episodes, exclusive content, and the occasional Zoom with our fan favorites from our past episodes. It's a lot of fun over there, people.
Most of us have clothes we've loved for years, maybe even decades. But it's harder than ever to find clothing that will stand the test of time. So before you update your closet this summer, take a look at American Giant. From hoodies and t-shirts to denim and more, they've got everything you need to build a wardrobe that you'll be proud of for summers to come. American Giant is made in the USA. That ensures that they can deliver items of exceptional quality, but it also creates jobs across the country. You're not just buying clothes that last, you're helping create a lasting change in the communities where they're made, and a connection to the seamsters, cutters, and factory workers who make them. Discover the American Giant difference today. Shop wardrobe essentials that last a lifetime at American-Giant.com and get 20% off your order when you use code LT23 at checkout. That's 20% off at American-Giant.com, promo code LT23.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family, but everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one. So you went and did this mission. You moved to Utah, to the community. What was it like before it turned bad? What was the good about it?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. We're in Strawberry River Canyon in Utah, near Duchesne, Utah. And it looks like the Holy Land. It's just gorgeous, dramatic landscape. And it's high desert. The air was clear. And it just felt like, I'm in a different world. It's not damp and green like New England.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from New England, and I loved it. And David was there, and he would run these movies in the evening and interpret them and have me videotape his talks. And I thought, here I am doing it. And I had already, before I got there, I'd edited his book called Awakening Through A Course in Miracles. And I did a great job. And I thought, they're going to be really happy for me. And I'm very humble. I won't even put my name on it as editor. But they said, thanks. Yeah. And that was it. And I thought, I'm not drawn into the inner circle. And I should have had awareness of these things and let them be flags. Like even back in Mallorca, Spain, that first 6-week retreat that we did, I was in one of the early discussion meetings with David, all the participants, and he was talking. And at one point, there was a pause, and one of the participants looked confused. I answered the participant's question. I thought we're all in this together. Dead silence. I couldn't believe it. I had obviously violated some unwritten rule that you don't try to usurp the voice of David. And I couldn't believe how long the silence went on. And then they finally started talking again, but not about anything I had said. And I had spent, 5 days in the Peace House, which was David's first place in Cincinnati. And during the whole 5 days, he hardly said hello to me. And I thought he thought I was a good disciple or something. But basically, he continued to ignore me the whole time. And I should have seen that there's no real connection here. He doesn't really care about me or what I'm thinking or doing. I mean, he likes the results of the videos and the editing. But
you're an asset.
When I read your book, I felt very strongly wishing I could just transport into time and pluck you right out of there, because I did not like how you were treated. And trust me, we've both been there as assets. But I was thinking he's like the Mark Vicente of.
Yeah, were you working for free?
Yeah.
No, I was paying $1,000 a month.
Oh my God.
I mean, he sent me around to different places: Spain, Hawaii, Mexico for 2 different years, and Canada. And I was like a teacher. I would lead discussion groups and take counseling calls from people and sort of do a lot of the on-the-ground teaching about the Course. But I wasn't given anything special or acknowledged for that.
Because that would have been an ego situation.
Right. Yeah, I thought all of this is appropriate because I'm supposed to dismantle my ego
Right.
and become one who hears the voice of the Holy Spirit, not the ego.
How convenient for a group to have.
So being abused is doing the work.
Yeah. For a group to extort value from people to function and thrive, they have to tell people that asking for compensation or remuneration or appreciation would be egoic. Like, how convenient.
Yes. Yeah.
Fuck.
Well, that's why I thought, I think most of my problem was because of David as a narcissist cult leader.
In your opinion.
Yeah, in my opinion. My humble opinion. But I also looked at the course too, and I say, yeah, this is a good primer, a good setup belief system for a cult leader to come in and say, okay, I hear the voice of the Holy Spirit. I hear the voice of Jesus. I'll tell you. And, I believed that. And I was hoping I'd hear the voice of the Holy Spirit and never did.
That was a part I noticed in your book that you were like, what did it mean to you that everyone else was hearing this voice and you were not?
Everyone wasn't, but David and the messengers were.
Right.
So the messengers were people who devoted their lives to this ministry. They'd given everything they owned to it. So if they were married, they divorced, or if they had a house, they sold it, and they gave everything really effectively to David. And these people, he thought they could hear the voice of the Holy Spirit too. So they would direct things. I had some doubts about that because actually they were just human beings. And I could see they were making some kind of mistaken decisions. But I thought, well, they're learning too, or they're evolving. And I forgave everything.
Did you ever voice those doubts? And if so, what would have happened?
Well, I remember there's one time I was sitting at a table where we were having we used to have afternoon expression sessions. And I was sitting there with a messenger, and we started arguing about something. And I said something that really upset this messenger. And she said back to me, "You can't say that. You don't even deserve to be here. You should leave." And I said, "No, I'm not going to leave. You'll leave." And she got up and left the room, which was my sort of only little victory in that department.
In reading your book, it's clear that you've had a lot of healing and recognizing the journey that you've been on and how you were taken advantage of. You stayed for a while, it seemed like, where you were having these doubts that you couldn't reconcile them. Tell me some of those points that you saw something, and then what were you telling yourself that kept you in?
For one thing, I was committed to it because I'd burned all my bridges financially and relationally with family and friends. And so I thought, I've put 100% into this path. I've thought it's the only true path, and I'm going to stick with it. I have an incident to talk about.
Yes.
I was doing great as a teacher of A Course in Miracles, and they sent me to Canada for a bunch of teaching. And I went with this other guy who was a member of Living Miracles, and we went off to teach a very sophisticated course group in Canada. And I started out, and they were talking about relationships. And I thought, I got stuck. I came against a wall in my mind. I thought, I don't believe this stuff about, David said no people pleasing. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Jesus was a loving person, and he didn't have no people pleasing as his motto. And I found I hit the wall at that session, and I just decided to shut up and let my colleague lead it. But after that, I was completely disillusioned. I thought, the truth in me is that I can't do this. I used to be a teacher of empathic communication, and I've gone off the deep end. I'm the opposite of who I used to be.
You were a teacher of empathic communication, just for our audience, before A Course in Miracles. Like, you had a whole career before A Course in Miracles. Right.
And I wrote a book
about that, right,
called Creating Harmonious Relationship. Yeah. And it sold out. It's very popular. And I had a group of trainers working for me.
Wow.
And we traveled around the country and taught people how to connect more deeply from a heart level. And I loved that. And yeah, it was total opposite of what happened to me in Canada.
I do find that an interesting part of your journey is that you were very well accomplished before A Course in Miracles. And, a lot of the people, like, at least for myself, like I got pulled in when I was not accomplished yet. So it's interesting to me that you had this body of work and had written a book and were a leader in your sphere.
That to me fortifies my instincts that David knew that and sat next to you and knew that you might be an asset for what he was doing.
Targeted you as an asset.
I think you're on something. Yeah. That totally went over my head.
Is that your first time recognizing that?
That's what I would do if I was looking
Had you recognized that
talent.
you were plucked for your ability?
I thought it's all good because I'm being recognized because God has given me these skills and abilities, and now he's showing me where to use them.
Wow.
And, I didn't have any compensation. In fact, I paid to be there. But I thought, what an honor. I'm among the first or the holiest or whatever.
I'm just curious, the person who invited you to the thing where you met David, did they know about your skill set?
Well, it was me David talked to me and encouraged me to leave my wife and family and house and everything, come join the community on the phone.
So you got a personal invite from Jesus's confidant.
Yeah, and then one of his messengers also was telling me to do that.
Oh, Andy. You got plucked for your immense value and personhood that you had not yet seen for yourself.
But others did.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I went into the meat grinder and got shredded.
One of the things that was so apparent as a reader, and you laid it out so well in your book, is just the nonstop inconsistencies of the teachings and then the reality and the cognitive dissonance that you were in, trying to wrap your head around all of that to make your decision to stay make sense.
Yeah.
It's heart-wrenching. It really was. And I feel like you laid that out for a reader who may not understand what it feels like in those places. And you talked about how you burned your bridges, you were in this cognitive dissonance. What was the final, unless there's any other red flags that we missed that you want to share or things that were happening?
Oh, no. That just got me thinking of the final thing, which was I was pretty depressed after being disillusioned with it, but I had nowhere to go. And I thought the Course could still be right. David could still be right, even though I'm disillusioned. And in a sense, I can't get off this bus. I have nowhere to go. And then I was living in Mexico, and through one of his messengers, David gave me the message that I needed to give him all my money or he would kick me out.
Wow.
Because you had an inheritance.
That's right. And it had come to me. My mail was coming to Utah, and the policy was they would just open it and tell me if anything was important while I was in Mexico. So I got this huge check, and they opened it. And then they told me it was there. And then David said, you need to give us all this money, which was over $200,000. And, I sweated about it. I thought I have no other choice. At least have a place to sleep. I couldn't imagine myself going out in the world after I'd had my mind controlled about everything. I thought I can't function in the world. And here I have a bed, and I'm supposed to be on the right path. So I agreed to give him the money. And I came up to Utah to give him the money. And I thought, before I do that, there's one messenger who has been my close friend and I know cares about me. And we used to, if I was upset about something, I would go to her and we would lie on her bed and cuddle, non-sexually, but intimately. And I would spill out my guts. And then she would say, well, Andy, the one thing that's keeping you from developing and growing spiritually is that you're holding on to this pile of money. And yes, you should give it up, and you'll see that removes the obstacle that's been holding you back. Okay, I gave the money. And not too long after that, they kicked me out anyhow. And as I was walking out, there's this scene I'll never forget. This messenger, she, who was very attractive and sweet, was standing outside my door as I packed my suitcase. And I come out into the hall, and she's got a completely deadpan or severe, almost angry expression on her face. And she said, "You should have told me before you decided to leave." Usually they have these things coordinated. I didn't. And then she said, "You still owe us money, the pesos, for the taxi fare for some of us to go from Guadalajara to Chapala." So I said, okay. And I gave her my wad of pesos. And then she was done with me. That was it. She was collecting her last bit.
Wow.
And it was apparent to me that she didn't give a shit about me. And that was the most devastating realization.
Ugh, Annie, I'm so sorry.
For more background on what brought us here, check out Sarah's page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, and at most bookstores. If you want to see that story in streaming form, watch both seasons of The Vow on HBO.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
You've heard from our sponsors. Now let's get back to a little bit culty, shall we? There is, in the book, you want to share how you got it back?
Oh, yeah. I flew back to my sister's house, and about a year it took me to going to psychiatrists, taking medication, and I was even hospitalized for a while, and I had ECT treatments, but I found my authentic self again, particularly because of the love of Brenda. And I met Brenda shortly after I landed in Boston. And she is the most loving, wonderful person I've ever met. And her friends say that about her too. And it was the miracle. When I talk about finding miracles in the book, it's really about her. And she encouraged me to demand my money back. And I did. I wrote this really professional sounding letter and sent it to David. And bingo, he agreed to give me the money back. I think he was afraid I was going to sue them. I hinted I might sue them for psychological damages. So he gave me the money back.
How did that feel?
Yeah.
It feels good to hear.
Very good. Yeah.
That was my favorite.
Wonderful.
When I read that, I gave you a fist pump.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good. And other people, since I wrote the book, have been saying, "Oh, gee, I wish I'd done that." I gave them everything. One of them says, "I'm sleeping on a friend's couch now. I have nothing." And people have been afraid not only to ask for their money, but just afraid to speak up. And so I've got fan mail from all over Europe and Australia and Canada from people who say, "Yay, me too. That's what happened to me. Thank you so much for writing this."
Your story is not a unique one-off in this community. This happens to a lot of people, but they don't talk about it because they don't
Exactly.
want to get in trouble. What's the fear in that community?
I don't know what they're afraid of so much, except I know I was very afraid. Like I read about how the Scientology goes after people. And we didn't talk to people after they left. And so we sort of shunned them, but nobody went after them. But I was terribly afraid to do it myself. I thought, I'm all alone. Over 2 million people love A Course in Miracles. I'm going to get killed. Not literally, but I'm going to get a lot of angry people writing me messages. How could you do this? And that wasn't true at all. I haven't really received one angry message. Some people, course leaders, have said, we interpret the course differently.
Right.
And I know they do. And I thought, yeah, that's fair. It's kind of like the Bible,
Right.
the Course in Miracles. You can read it different ways, interpret it different ways, and practice it different ways. And there are a lot of course teachers I have the highest respect for who teaches it in a loving, positive way. So most of my criticism is for the cult that was formed around the course in Utah.
So we have a lot of people who write in asking us to cover different things. And this, A Course in Miracles, has been brought up multiple times. And as I emailed you about, I have a dear friend who actually was also in NXIVM with me, who is now like a reverend or something in A Course in Miracles. I will share this episode with her because I wish more people had told me what they thought when I was in NXIVM. But I think it's important for people to understand the difference between the book and the community. And what do you want people to know, like who might be into?
Like, where are the abuses?
Where are the abuses? Like, where do they need to be careful with this journey?
The only place I think they really need to be careful is with Living Miracles. It's an international ministry. It's all over the world, very popular. David is very charismatic, and they just need to know, don't go to live there. And there are other great teachers on both coasts and in the middle, some of whom I've sent my book to, and they said, we're all reading this. And I don't want to badmouth any other course-based group. And there isn't really a organization that's a Course in Miracles. There's the founders, Foundation for Inner Peace, and ACIM.org. They're good people, and they're wise teachers. And I'm sorry that this happened in one little nest of A Course in Miracles.
Oh, that's a good thing to be clear
about.
Very
healthy disposition to have.
We used to tell people, don't move to Albany.
Right.
take the tools, use them, don't move to Albany. And now, what do you think has been the most healing, and how have you found a sense of purpose outside of A Course in Miracles? What's your journey been like?
I'm very grateful for all the people who've sent me messages at my website, andrewlecompte.com, and thanking me for starting this. And several of them would like to continue talking to each other about their experience. So we're thinking of finding a way to set that up that is secure and safe for people who are afraid. Then, I teach English as a second language. I have my life back. I'm a happy guy. I go to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Waltham, and it's great. It's a diverse group of loving people with the same shared values. And I republished my book, Creating Harmonious Relationships, and I'm a happy, fulfilled, retired person.
And how's Brenda?
She's wonderful. We just hug and kiss every day, and we're just so glad to be alive together, sharing life. And I mean, the only bad thing that's happened to me was my son died accidentally. He wrote me this loving letter that really let me know while I was in the cult that he loved me and that he wanted me to come home and that he forgave me for leaving because he could see I did it for my own reasons, not to abandon him. And that letter really motivated me to come home.
It was an amazing letter.
Yeah, it's in the book. And I mean, I loved him so much and he loved me so much. We'd had a very close relationship. And so I was with him for like 4 years after I got out. And then he accidentally had some fentanyl, a little tiny bit, that killed him because fentanyl is very deadly.
Ugh, what a tragedy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. He was into so many wonderful things and so loving and giving. It's really a loss for the world.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Thanks.
So where's David now?
He's still online still leading programs. They're going to have a big music festival in Utah this summer and attract a lot of people to the canyon to share music. And that's a fun event. The cook from a former event told me that she could feel something was unhealthy about Living Miracles, even at the music festival. There's more that yet to be uncovered. Some of the people who've written to me experienced much more serious abuse and are suffering now with PTSD and mental illness that's directly related to the trauma that they experienced in Living Miracles.
Other than you, do you know anyone that's speaking out, and how much of an impact is a speaking out having on David that you can tell?
Yeah, I don't know of anyone. I think I broke the ice here, and that other people will come along when they see that I'm not gone after or harmed by Living Miracles.
Good for you.
I mean, of course, there got to be a lot of good people in there too, as there were in NXIVM.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
One question I meant to ask earlier was, in your healing journey, when did you figure out, oh, that was a cult in your experience?
It took me a long time, actually. I'd been out for a while, and I had a talk with Stephen Hassan. Said quite clearly it was a cult, and then I should write a book and expose him. And I also got support from Rick Ross, who's the director of the Cult Education Institute, who's a wonderful man, wrote me a great endorsement. And I thought, wow, all of these, actually writing the book was the real final therapy that did it for me. To get it down there, the way I see the world now, as against, when my mind was all screwed up. Yeah, writing the book, I'm out of the woods. It's good. It's down there. Yeah. That's the record. That's the truth.
Yes. So cathartic. Yeah. Highly recommend. I mean, it can be stressful too, right? I'm imagining some parts, but mostly cathartic.
Oh, yeah. Definitely cathartic.
Well, speaking of endorsements, and Rick Ross, I know, wrote you a lovely one, but I'm going to read mine so I can endorse it officially here on the podcast. And
thank you so much.
Of course. And to our audience, we've skipped over a lot of key moments and juicy details and personal anecdotes. I want to leave some things to be discovered in your journey, but I will say that I wrote, what's on the cover is a short version of the long version. I'm going to read you the long version. Essential reading for anyone searching for life's answers, community, or a connection to something bigger. This book is at once a warning to others and a personal journey of self-love and acceptance. Andrew's vulnerable expose of his slow boil into an insidious cult exposes the playbook of how coercive control masquerades as a spiritual path. A must-read.
Thank you. And yes, to call it a slow boil, that's the metaphor of the frog in the water.
Right.
And as it heats up, if it heats up slowly, which is what happened to me, you don't notice it and you die. It was a slow boil. I love it.
Well, I love that you jumped out of that pot. You wrote the book. You're trailblazing the way for other people to come forward. You're healing. You're living your best life.
Found what you're looking for.
Found what you're looking for outside of it.
Yeah,
and that's the part that makes me so happy. You found all of the love.
My miracle.
You found the miracle of love outside of the place that promised it. So I am so happy to have met you. I'm so proud of you. And I want to know, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to say to our audience?
Just encourage them to connect with me if they're a former member of the Living Miracles community, so that we know we're not alone. That was the big thing that was frightening me at the beginning, being all alone, have everybody say, oh, you're wrong, you're just screwed up.
Thanks for sharing, Andy.
Consider yourself a new friends. You have new friends here in Atlanta, so please come and visit and know that we're here to support you.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Nippy. This has been great to talk with you.
Like what you hear, do you? Give us a rating, a review, and subscribe on iTunes. Every little bit helps us get this cult awareness content out there. Smash that subscribe button. You know you want to.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today with our premiere Little Bit Culty Course in Miracles episode with Andrew LeCompte.
We urge you to get yourself a copy of his memoir, Finding Miracles, Escape from a Cult. We'll link that in our show notes. It's worth your time.
For those of you feeling defensive about your good time in A Course in Miracles, don't forget you can keep your goodness and still be curious about what may have been bad for others. And P.S., we don't have any kind of sponsorship deals for the books or authors we feature on the show. It's not an ad. We just like to let you know about things that we think you should read if you're interested in learning more about this stuff.
We just want you to hear some of the non-miraculous things that can happen when any text or teaching or community gets to be too big for its spiritual britches. Know what I mean?
And I'm going to say it again. If you love A Course in Miracles, love what you love. We're not here to yuck your yum.
Okay, find us over on Patreon and let us know what you think. Let's keep the conversation going.
Till next time.
Bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're heading over to patreon.com/a-little-bit-culty now to discuss this episode. In the meantime, dear listener, please remember, this podcast is solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for real medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. For cult recovery resources and to learn more about seeking safely in this culty world, check out a-little-bit-culty.com/culty resources and don't miss Sarah's TED Talk called How Cult Literate Are You? Great stuff.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production, executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound and our co-creator and show chaplain / bodyguard, Jess Temple Tardy. And our theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant.